Hey everybody, welcome to my booth. I'm Jay, if we haven't met yet. I just finished recording an audiobook and I thought I'd bring you along for the ride as I record some pickups and fix up my audio so that it's ready for publication. Before we dive in, if you like this stuff and you find it helpful, if you're willing to take a couple seconds to click the buttons down there, it helps other folks find us. And if you want to go a step further to support me in this channel and these efforts directly, you can buy me a coffee or do the YouTube super thanks thing. Neither necessary, both wonderfully appreciated. Let's get into it. So, to do all my quality assurance listens and flag errors that I've made, I use Positron. It's an AI software online that scans the PDF of your book or story, whatever you're recording, and cross-checks it to the audio you've recorded. It does a scan of both and sees when you're saying the wrong word, when maybe you've mispronounced something, and it also checks noises. So if you have a chair squeak, if a dog barks in the background, it'll flag those with moderate accuracy. It's a little harder for it to detect that stuff than word perfection, but and then you go through listening as such. 100 miles north of Oxel's location. And if I hear something that I think, I can fix that or do that better, I simply highlight it in this text. Boom, it pops up over here, and I can choose whatever error it is specifically to know what I'm trying to fix, save it, and then it'll pop up when I export it. Then when I'm done listening through the whole book, I go over here. There's this import-export button. I export my DAW markers. I record everything in Reaper, so I click Reaper. And I do timestamps relative to the start of the book, and that's because I record my entire audiobook in one long track chronologically. So this makes sure that all of my pickup markers line up directly with the pickups that I need to make. Then I'll export it, and then in Reaper, when I pull it open, I have this region marker manager down here. I'll right-click here, and I'll import regions and markers, but there are two options. I select the one merge with existing because I have markers that I've set up where character voices pop up, and I want to make sure that I keep those. I don't want to erase them. And then I also have all of my regions, which are the chapters of my book. So I split those up, and I want to make sure that I keep those. So as I right-click, import regions and markers, merge with existing, go to downloads, I pull up the Sleeper Positron markers. The Sleeper is the name of this book. And then it'll bring them into this region marker manager, and I can simply click through and find the pickups. It takes me directly to the audio, and it's just really, really great and efficient in that way. And then back in Positron, the next thing that I'll do is export a pickup packet. And it'll take me to pickup packet, online version, and it'll export. It takes me to this window where it has all of the pickups that I've flagged that I need to fix. It shows me the text in the PDF and the words that I'm trying to fix up, as well as here you can see what exactly I'm trying to fix. And typically in audiobook production, if you as the narrator aren't doing the whole process, you'll simply record the pickup. So I'll just record this sentence and say, page 49, he knew that this call could be his last. And it gives me the audio here, and it'll play it so that I can hear exactly
He knew that this call would be his last.
And then I would just read it in the same intonation. I don't need that because I have all of my markers plugged into Reaper itself, and I fix it in the audio. So what I'll do is play this.
He knew that this call would be his last.
He knew that this call would be his last. I need to change would to could. So there are a couple ways that I'll do it. This is a standalone sentence, so it's really easy. He knew that this call could be his last. And then I'll just play it to make sure that it sounds okay in context.
Voice trembling with fear.
He knew that this call could be his last.
He knew Tatiana could have given him the number.
I'm going to do it one more time, just to give it the same sort of emotional weight. He knew that this call could be his last. And then I'll tighten it up a little bit. This is the thing that I like about Reaper is I can just simply drag stuff and move things around. And this little ticker here, it's the sort of ripple editing. So this means nothing will change down the line. This means that only things in this track will be changed. So if I delete this, it moves everything in that track up, but nothing else changes. You'll notice that the marker didn't move, the region didn't move. If I want those to track along, I'll click this again so that all three of those are highlighted, and that means the entire document, this entire session, all things will shift if I delete something. So delete, you'll notice that the marker's gone and everything else will have shifted down. So that fix is done. We'll delete that from the marker and move on to the next. Up here in my pickup packet, I'll scroll down and we'll see what this sounds like.
Of a CIA Gulfstream 550 jet.
So I forgot the G550, so we'll zoom in a bit. And another thing that's great about Reaper is it has this auto punch roll tool. So if I right-click on the record button in this transport window, right-click, time selection auto punch, I can click on that. Then up here, I can highlight the bit that I want to change. And then as I record something, it'll just start recording during that time selection and stop as it exits that time selection. I'll show you what I mean.
Ross sat facing Tatiana in the passenger compartment
of a CIA Gulfstream 550 jet. Okay, so you'll notice that I had some overlap there, and I'd stopped talking a little bit before. Another beautiful thing, I can hold down Alt, or Option, rather. I'm on a Mac, and you'll see that my cursor turns into this arrow with the sort of sideways deal. It allows me to slide this back and forth to line things up perfectly. So if I play this,
passenger compartment
of a CIA Gulfstream 5, and I can also drag this out a little bit to merge it a little bit more, to merge the two and make it a little bit more seamless if I want.
Passenger compartment
of a CIA, but I don't like that. It sounded good the way I had it, so we'll just tighten it up a smidge.
Passenger compartment
of a CIA Gulfstream 550 jet. Sounds good to me. We'll move on to the next one. I'll go down here, delete that just to keep things clean as I move forward, and scroll down here. Let's give this one a listen.
The flight with Tatiana had rattled him.
I said flight, the word is fight, and sometimes I don't need the time punch auto selection, so I'll just go back to record mode normal, and this means it'll just record over the audio that I have here. So I'll play it one more time so it's fresh.
The flight with Tatiana had rattled him.
The fight with Tatiana had rattled him. Play it in context, make sure it sounds okay.
But couldn't.
The fight with Tatiana had rattled him.
There'd been a time when he...
Sounds good to me. Moving on to the next. So in this one, I added a word few. Let's give it a listen.
And of those few that were, few remembered the immense...
And of those that were is what I need to change. Now this is in the middle of a sentence, so I'm going to use that auto punch tool. Just going to highlight what I need and right click, time selection auto punch, and we'll play. And I'll read through the whole thing just so that my emotional state and my inflection is similar to what's in the recording. Let's give it a go.
Not many left in the agency from those days.
And of those that were, few... I'll tighten this up a bit.
From those days, and of those that were, few remembered the...
We'll drag this out. Now the cool thing about Reaper is you'll see if I drag this out, it shows me where I stopped speaking.
Were.
So I naturally had this amount of pause between the two. So I can match this up with that, drag it over, and you can see the waveform sort of molding over the other one. And this just helps me make sure that my timing is really sharp. And then I'll drag it back a little bit just so that I'm not doubling up the speech on that. Let's give it another try and see how it sounds. And of those that were, few remembered the... There's a bit of overlapping sound, so we'll just take that out a bit. And of those that were, few remembered the immense personal... Sounds good to me. And it goes without saying that you want to make sure that your microphone is in exactly the same position, that your settings are the same, your gain and all the processing, if you do processing, is set up equally the same as everything else in the audiobook, it makes punching in really, really easy, or at least easier than it would be if you had changed things. All right, let's give this one a listen and see what we've got. And the traffic ebbed from one spotlight to the next, like water. So this one's a little bit tricky because the word that we're trying to change is in the middle of a sentence. And we don't want to just punch in that word because then it'll turn into that classic AI word thing like, welcome to the 8th floor, something like that. And we don't want that because it's just going to take the listener out of the moment. Now, there are ways to punch into the middle of a sentence as fluidly as you can. And there are certain points in human speech when the flow of sound from our voices stops. And they happen naturally at consonant sounds. So, check, k. Sound stops after the k, or stop. It stops briefly, or little, the t in the middle of little. There's a little break in sound going off there. And you can see it in the waveform in certain moments, like here, sound stops flowing. Here, sound stops flowing. In this one, there's the next. The T at the end of next, we stop sound. Give it a listen. Next, like water. Next, like water. There's a brief moment where things stop, and then we move on. So those are good points where you can either punch in or punch out. And the thing that I like about Reaper is I don't have to make sure that I stop at that point exactly. I can record over the whole thing and just keep going and slide things back and forth so that it matches up perfectly. As an example, making sure that I've got this ripple edit so I'm not screwing up the positioning of everything, I'm just going to drag this over. I'm going to give this a listen again so that I have the intonation in my mind, and then I'm just going to record the full sentence here and edit things around. And the traffic ebbed from one spotlight to the next. And the traffic ebbed from one stoplight to the next. Now I'll just drag this over to get rid of that. I'm going to leave this little bit open so I know exactly when I started speaking so I can line it up. Boom. I'll pull this back so that I'm not getting the same speech twice. And then I'll pull this over. And let's give it a listen. And the traffic ebbed from one stoplight to the next, like water being released from sluice gates. So let's move on to the next one. He'd seen how love can be used against a man, how it could make him vulnerable. So this one's a pretty simple fix. We'll just highlight and roll into it. To get the flow of the sentence, I'll start a little bit before and roll through. Fanatical even. He'd seen how love could be used against a man, how it could. So I try to match the breath there and make sure that I have a similar flow into the next sentence because my pacing was, he'd seen how love could be used against a man. How it could make him vulnerable. I used the breath to catapult myself into the next sentence. I want to match that so I make sure that the breath is the same. He'd seen how love could be used against a man, how it could make him vulnerable. Sounds good? If his superiors saw him in a willingness to do what others would not. Again, this one, there's a breath, so I'm going to punch out on the breath just to make things easy and try to make sure that the breath has a similar quality. If his superiors saw in him a willingness to do what others would not, and if he had. So in this one, to match the pacing, I'm going to pull this out, drag this breath so I can see the end of when I stopped speaking and went into the breath, line that up with my new recording, and then just drag it back so that the breath is matching up cleanly. And we'll give it a listen. Willingness to do what others would not, and if he had a string of success. Clean. Let's keep going. So this is one where I could punch in on complete. I say competently, but I need to change that to complete because the k is a stoppage in sound flow. You can see it right here in the audio. There is no sound happening there, and it starts with the k, complete. The danger there is that it'll sound different, sort of the AI punch-in phenomenon. Welcome to the 5th floor. So we'll give it a try, see if it works. I would probably just record this whole sentence, but just as an example, we'll see if this flies. I'll start before, get the flow into it, and go from there.
Years,
He developed a startlingly complete view of Moscow's Byzantine oligarchy. All right, let's give it a listen.
A startlingly complete
Sounds pretty good.
A startlingly complete view of Moscow's Byzantine.
So that's an example where the k is a great place to slide in and not have to fix the whole sentence. Something that short, it might be simpler just to complete the whole thing, re-record the whole thing rather. But if you have a long paragraph and you need to just change something right in the middle of it, look for those stoppages of sound and it'll make things simpler.
Hamish rammed another bin, crashed a bank of locked bicycles, then...
So the crashed is supposed to be crushed. I'm going to try and punch in just that little section because I don't want to have to re-record this whole thing. So I'll zoom in right on the k, crushed, crash, because it's the same. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of wiggle room and go over the breath. So my time selection is that whole crushed a bank of locked bicycles, that whole section. And I'm going to read the whole sentence. Here we go.
Hamish rammed another bin,
crashed another...
Hamish rammed another bin,
crushed a bank of locked bicycles,
then hit a...
Let's play it, see what we need to shift.
Rammed another bin,
Crushed a bank. So this is one where it's really helpful to have that alignment thing. So I'll drag this out so that I know that the C on crushed starts right there. I'm going to drag my new audio, line that up perfectly, then drag it away so that I don't have duplicate C sounds coming in. And then same issue here at the end. I'm going to drag this out so that my breath and timing matches up with the end of this speech, and then drag this back over. And we'll give that a listen. That's a really easy way to visually match things up instead of trial and error auditory with your ears auditorially.
Another bin, crushed a bank of locked bicycles, then hit a sturdy...
Really smooth, really even. Let's keep rolling.
The men's going to be at King Cross in an hour. King Cross.
The K there is a good punch-in spot.
Men's going to be
at King's Cross.
Men's
going to be at King's Cross Station in an hour.
You can meet him.
Again, the beautiful thing about Reaper is it records after I've punched in and out with this technique, the auto time selection. So I can drag this out and there's the audio. I don't have to worry about fitting into a certain point, which just makes this whole process really, really seamless. Let's give it a listen.
He's going to be at King's Cross Station in an hour. You can meet him there.
Perfect. So to just summarize everything, there are a couple different ways and places where punching in and out your pickups make the editing a lot more seamless. Looking for stoppages of sound, whether that's at a breath point where you can merge the breaths together to make a seamless flow, or at a consonant break. The plosive percussive sounds are great punch-in, punch-out points. And then at the end of the day, if you need to record the whole thing, it's really not the end of the world. But I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions about this or anything else voiceover related, you can hit me up here on my website. There's coaching on my website if you want to work on stuff like this together one-on-one or via email. And until the next one of these, I'll see you there and be well. Doodles.